Hi everybody and welcome to a new Heresy episode of Plaguenarr. And as usually we're gonna start with priming the mini black with green stuff with matte black surface primer and directly heading over to neutral gray of Pro Acryl. We're mixing this with around about 3 to 4 parts water and starting to stipple on base coat all over the mini. I'm using Artis Opus Series D size M brush to do so. And what's important about the base coat is that we want to achieve a good coverage but still a rough structure. And this is because of the painting style I wanted to create here. I already created 3 different recipes of white for you. But in this case, I wanted something completely different. And one of my favorite artworks of the Heresy series is the False Gods cover. And this is basically the painting style I want to achieve on this Lunar Wolf. So next, we're using our texture palette or preparing our texture palette to start some dry brushing. In this case, I took neutral gray and bright neutral gray, also of Pro Acryl, and started to create a 50-50 mix in my dry brush and then started to dry brush some highlights onto the mini. And to create shadow and light, I usually do circular motions into the direction where light would hit the mini. And if you have no idea where light would hit the mini, simply take your mini under a lamp, take a photo with a smartphone, and you have a perfect reference to go for. Next, we're using pure neutral gray and using basically the same pattern. The only difference is that we try to don't over highlight the mini here. And this is really important to create the atmosphere from the False Gods cover, because the main colors in this cover are more darkish gray with a couple of bright white highlights. And this is what we're trying to do here. We're creating a whitish look by using darker gray colors, highlighting them up with bright gray colors, which already gives the illusion of white. And in the end, we're creating small, bright white highlights to enhance this whitish effect. But first of all, we're taking bold titanium white, also with a large dry brush of Artis Opus. And what I'm doing now, I don't use any circular motions anymore. I'm now using dry brush strokes from above just to create a couple of white edge highlights and a couple of white volumetric highlights. And I want to keep them down as much as I can, because I don't want to overtune the white at the moment. Next, we're heading over to coal black to start base coating the armor trims, the cables, and the subsuit, of course. And one thing I've learned over the years, if I paint with heavy covering color on white, in this particular case black, which probably is the most covering color on white, that I always try to keep my paint really thin, that it flows really nice. This helps you to don't go into strange angles and do a couple of mistakes that are really hard to fix on a white surface. And with the usual Vallejo gunmetal gray from the Air series, we're starting to base coat all the metal parts. Keep in mind that you use an old brush and don't use your expensive brushes. they will get damaged otherwise. In the next step, we're starting to highlight all the black parts with dark warm gray of Pro Acryl. And in this particular case, I'm doing a couple of volumetric highlights, which are the primary highlight source, and a couple of edge highlights. But I'm going for a little bit more rough edge highlights here that are not so clean like EV metal paintings, just to fit also more into the artwork of the False Gods cover. Just try to make a little bit more haste here to get a little bit of variation in, and don't make the highlights too clean. The smoothness will anyways be applied by the oil wash. With the neutral gray, we're now adding a second highlight layer to all the volumetric and edge highlights we created on the black parts. Especially on the volumetric highlights, you don't have to create real smooth transitions. This will also be achieved by the oil wash. We're then finishing up the black parts with a couple of reflection highlights on the black surfaces that should be most paid attention to. And we're back to bold titanium white to finishing most of the armor parts with a couple of also upper edge reflection highlights with pure white. And don't be afraid of the strange look and feel. This will all come together with the oil wash and the highlights in the final stage. With burnt red, we're then creating a couple of blood marks over the weapon and armor. And if I still know it right, the story background is that the Lunar Wolves use these blood marks to count their kills in battle. And this is one of the elements of the False Gods cover that triggered me the most to paint this particular Lunar Wolf style. With bold Pyrrole red, we're then just add a couple of highlights to these blood marks, and it's not so important that they are as clean as you can in this stage. We will fix them up after we applied some armor chipping and battle damage. With the Iron Breaker, we're then simply just highlighting all the bolts on the Mini, and of course adding a couple of reflection and edge highlights to all the metal parts we base coated with gunmetal gray. With Microsol, we're done preparing the surfaces to put on some decals, and these decals from Fallout Hobbies are the worst decals I ever owned. The quality of the printing was so bad and I paid so much money for them that I just want to use them and thought, maybe the oil wash will fix this, but the oil wash won't fix this. This is why I overpainted them in a later stage. We're then preparing the Mini with an overall coat of Vallejo Premium Gloss Varnish, and I wanted to show you that you can even apply this varnish with a brush. I got several requests to show this. Here is how it works. And then we're taking the usual Schminke, burnt sienna and ivory black to create a dark black brownish mix. And in this particular case, I added a little bit more of black to fit more into the grayish colors, and then added my usual amount of mineral spirit to create a contrast-like consistency of the oil wash. And then of course apply the mix all over the Mini. And one thing I should probably also mention here is that I have a specific brush for oil washes. It's a big synthetic brush because other brushes or regular brushes would also get damaged by the consistency of the oil paints and mineral spirit.
A few moments later.
The oil wash should be dry around about 12 hours later, depends on the amount of mineral spirit you put into. And then we can start wiping off the oil wash from the surfaces and keep it into the recesses by using a couple of Q-tips or makeup brushes in my case. By the way, if you like this kind of guides, be my guest to share your feedback with me via the comments, hit the like button or subscribe to my channel. And we're finishing this up by applying a full coat of Vallejo Premium Satin Varnish and then go on with painting. And this is the stage where I fix the Fallout hobby, custom print decals. And guys, I tell you, I'm so annoyed about this company because I contacted them and complained about the quality of the decals and also, of course, the quality of the printing of the decals. And I ended up with contacting PayPal because they never answered my complaints, and I didn't even get my money back because Fallout Hobby somehow managed to avoid the reimbursement. So in the end, this was a really expensive template, which I painted over. Next time I simply would go for a freehand here. And here we go with the sponge chipping and armor damage by applying a bright neutral gray with a sponge and a couple of scratches with a regular size 00 brush. And I should apologize here a little bit because I also added a little bit of dark warm gray sponge chipping later on, but somehow I forgot to record this step. So simply just take your sponge from the bright neutral gray, use dark warm gray and add a little bit of sponge chipping where you added the sponge chipping with the bright neutral gray. We're intensing the white armor feeling then a little bit by adding a couple of edge highlights, also with bright neutral gray. With burnt red we're then removing the sponge chipping and intensing the blood marks a little bit more. This is the only part with dark warm gray and chipping I recorded. Sorry that it's so short, but at least you get a little bit of an idea how to do so. We're then base coating with coal black the eye sockets to create a base color we can use to create reflecting eye lenses. With burnt red we're then creating a base coat in the center of the eye lens and keep a little bit of the black around to give this some depth. With bold Perol red we're then creating the reflection by painting in 2/3 of the lens in the front. Then we're adding a tiny amount of bold titanium white and painting in 1/3 of the lens in the front of the lens and finishing up with a pure dot of bold titanium white in the upper corner of the eye lens. With a mix of bright neutral gray and 4 parts water, we're then starting to glaze in a couple of volumetric highlights that will give us the illusion of a white, bright armor in a real dark environment. And I focused here on the legs, on the right arm, the right shoulder pad and the right part of the face. And I did this because my light source was imagined from the right side basically, and this effect really comes to its strength if you paint certain amounts of this lightish gray colors in different levels of this mini, which will then create the illusion of a white armor in a dark environment, because you have certain amounts of bright gray reflections in the lower and in the upper parts. And what I would recommend here is that you go for a little bit of thicker highlights in the upper parts, and this is because naturally the Space Marine would draw a shadow to himself, which would make the upper parts appear a little bit brighter because of the lightning. And we're then finishing up the armor with pure bold titanium white by adding a couple of sharp reflection highlights to the volumetric highlights we created by glazing on the bright neutral gray. And what I also did, I added a real tiny reflection highlights onto the helmet and the right shoulder pad within the glaze volumetric highlight by stippling on a mix of bold titanium white and 5 parts water into the center of this reflection highlight. And this is how your mini should appear with the final reflection highlights. To integrate this mini a little bit more into the basing, I added a whole coat of Vallejo Pigment FX to my base and then used Vallejo pigments, in this case burnt sienna, pure out of the pot, and stippled it on to create a real dry and reddish desert environment. And to integrate this mini a little bit more into the environment, I then simply just take some of the pigment that's left on the base, stipple it onto the legs, and finishing up by blowing all the remainings off and painting the trim with pure Abaddon black. And here we go with our False Gods inspired Lunar Wolf. I hope you enjoyed this video and had some fun. Thanks for watching and hope to see you soon.